Putin's tactics to force Zelensky to negotiate are as primitive as the Kremlin wall. To de-energize Ukraine, plunging it into darkness, depriving it of water and freezing it. More than 10 million Ukrainians were left without electricity as a result of Russian rocket attacks. Kremlin maniacs, apparently, do not understand that by such actions they only increase the degree of self-hatred and increase resistance. The IAEA found no traces of a dirty bomb being made in Ukraine and demanded that the Russian Federation get out of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The Board of Governors does not recognize the attempts of the Russian Federation to take over the Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and calls on Russia to immediately renounce its unfounded claims to ownership of this plant, the statement said. In response, the Rashists make a transparent hint, sending a missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead towards Kyiv. So far with an ordinary blank, but the level of rage of the terrorists is understandable. By the way, the European Parliament just agreed on the text of a resolution recognizing Russia as a sponsor of terrorism, which will be put to a vote from 21 to 24 November. And after the document is adopted, seizures of property and freezing of other assets of a terrorist state will become an everyday occurrence in Europe. It was not possible to transfer money from pocket to pocket, and now they will logically go to Ukraine, which is suffering from the Kremlin's aggression. There is something to get excited about here, and rumors are already spreading through the Z channels that a general mobilization in the cave will be announced in December to January. Also, according to the operational information of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Rashists are preparing a bill that will legalize the conscription of Ukrainian citizens living in the occupied territories and who have received a chicken passport from the spring of 2023. Meanwhile, Zelensky's advisor, Podolyak, does not lose optimism, assuming the end of the war even before the liberation of all the territories occupied by the Russians. According to him, this can happen, for example, with the liberation of Luhansk or Donetsk. The symbols of propaganda will fall, and the Russian elites will have to urgently rebuild, or continue to plunge into chaos. The mobilized material has already been recognized as unsuitable for military operations. A large number of the so-called 500ths, those who refuse to fight, are completely unsuitable due to chronic diseases. There are not enough weapons, uniforms, while the promises of payments turned out to be fiction, and military training was an imitation. Mobuks are intimidated by detachments and executions in case of desertion. With such a morale, it is organic to drape to Moscow, and not to attack Kyiv. For the terrorist Gherkin and his accomplices, the news is also not very good. On November 17, the District Court of The Hague found Igor Gherkin, Strelkov, Sergei Dubinsky and Leonid Karchenko guilty of downing a Boeing MH17 over Donbass in 2014 and killing 298 people. Retired GRU officer Sergei Dubinsky and commander of the intelligence unit of the DPR Leonid Karchenko were also found guilty of this. They were all sentenced to life in prison. So now Gherkin, who signed a contract with Prigozhin just in time, will be on the Kremlin's hook until the last moment, until Putin decides to calm him down with a sledgehammer. Because Putin is the main customer of this crime, and none of Gherkin and Karchenko would risk shooting down a civilian plane in the sky over the Donbass. But so far, the Hague court has not established the degree of guilt of the Kremlin terrorist put, although it is on the surface, and this gives rise to an unpleasant question. Is observance of conditional politeness in front of an obvious maniac more important than truth? Peskov, about the verdict of the court in the Netherlands on the Malaysian Boeing, just muttered, "We regret that the representatives of Russia were not allowed to participate in the investigation." Of course, the serial maniac Chikatilo also lamented that he was not allowed to investigate his own exploits. The empire must die. A wreath with such an inscription was found on the grave of the former Secretary of State of the Russian Federation during the Yeltsin period, Gennady Burbulus, who died in June of this year. What a good idea, but on the way to its death, this hydra will gobble up a lot more human flesh. She is already starting to tear with her teeth. Either Kemzov will bite Sobchachka, or the Prigdinskys will rob Tinkov's villa in a Tuscan town. while the billionaire is basking in Mexico. And Aleksandr Pamfilova did not waste time on trifles, and announced the collapse of all ideologies. Everything that was formed, communists, liberals, Democrats, conservatives, Republicans, now everything has collapsed. We are moving into a new historical era, worldview. If she could explain what worldview her Kremlin masters profess, she would have no price. And if they say around the Kremlin that everything in the world is collapsing, it means that it was they who fell down, and they feel it. Medvedev dried up again and fell out in the information field with a new text. The topic of money for Ukraine is becoming toxic in the United States. The giant of bottle thought made a discovery. Congressmen demand total checks of where the giant money went, and where will the new tens of billions, requested by the strange old Biden, who was aptly called the vice president of Ukraine on Capitol Hill, go? But this was not enough for Medvedev, and he gurgled sublimely, hence the loss of the remnants of reality and the tearful tantrums of clowns in Kyiv. They dismissed the snot and in a frenzy demand more and more new sanctions against Russia, and more Western dough for the war. Only this can prolong their sweet narcotic agony. End of quote. The ability of a stubborn fash to turn meanings inside out never ceases to amaze. The empire is dead, but continues to imitate life, killing everyone in a row. The cave chieftains have turned into leprous outcasts, but stubbornly lean out into the outside world with their wild judgments, and only a total disregard with concreting of all entrances and exits in this territory can solve the problem of the obsessive grandeur of the wildlings. Live in parallel, in your dimension. You have a periodic table, Tolstoyevsky and vodka with Matryoshka. There are bast shoes and a hat with ear flaps, and a highly spiritual bear on point shoes at the Bolshoi Theater. Do not climb into the soulless world. This is not yours. Yours is a trampoline instead of a cosmodrome and an abacus instead of a computer. Stolen washing machine and putlaphone instead of iPhone. Fence off and gnaw each other on health in your cannibal. Don't interfere with people's lives in the modern world, where everyone can be themselves, white or black, or even rainbow, and it does not interfere with the implementation of others, and he has every right not to like the president or the prime minister, or even criticize the Pope himself. This is what freedom is, freedom of life, and not the triumph of death, which your wild post-Soviet tribes worship. The empire must die, along with your hate, and never be reborn again.